What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing part 2, the follow-up video to part 1 of January's PC of the month, which is the beautiful system that I have right next to me. It's already booted up, you can see the BIOS behind me on the screen, everything's working properly, and today we're going to be putting it through the ringer. So if you didn't catch part 1 where I assemble the rig, you can check that out, but this is where we actually put it to the test and test everything from thermals, acoustics, gaming performance, and overclocking. The whole shebang, so to speak. So should be interesting to find out exactly what this machine is capable of, because we've got some pretty robust hardware in here, including a Core i7-7700K and a GTX 1080 from EVGA, their hybrid variant, featuring an AIO liquid cooler on there. And really quick, I wanted to point out that it's been 2 or 3 weeks since I put this system together, and just from an aesthetic standpoint, I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. I think it looks great. I appreciate the fact that it's not lined with RGB LEDs for once, and it has this really subdued appearance, yet still comes off super aggressive. So I really like it, and I think overall, there's probably not a single thing that I would change about this system from a cosmetic standpoint. I mean, apart from the fractal Venturi fan not really matching the Corsair fans, but that's like a little thing. I mean, you guys don't care. I don't care, you know. And the Venturis are great fans. They cool well, they're quiet, they look nice, and who cares if there's a glaring break in visual continuity? Okay, you know, it looks hideous. I can't do this. Oh, so much better. Okay, we can continue now. And also, you might have noticed that I did change the LED on the motherboard from orange to white through the Asus Aura software. So now we're looking super cohesive, everything's looking good, and we may now move forward. So, the first thing I want to talk about, since we just swapped a fan out, let's talk about fans and what I did with those. So, we have 7 fans in total, 4 of which are on the X62 radiator. So these 2 right here, the ML Pros, should have been detected in the cam software because they're directly connected to the AIO water block. However, I did not see them in cam. This could be a bug. So these are just kind of left in the hands of NZXT. Whatever default configuration or profile that these fans run in out of the box, that's what we're running today. The other 2 fans, which are underneath the front panel of the Enthoo Pro M here that you can't see, those, as well as these 2 and the radiator fan on our GTX 1080 AIO, those are all configured with custom fan curves that I've set myself within Thermal Radar 2, which is a part of AI Suite 3, the very lovely app from Asus. So those are all configured, and I kind of tailored them for a nice balance between performance and acoustics. I didn't want to sway one way or the other too far, so I kept it very balanced and neutral. So with the fans all handled, I decided to jump into the BIOS and start overclocking our 7700K. I put a multiplier of 50, which gave us, of course, 5 gigahertz, and we were able to hit that stably at 1.375 volts, which falls in line with a lot of the other review websites out there. I also overclocked our GPU, of course. The GTX 1080 was able to hit 2063 megahertz, I believe, at its max core clock frequency, once I dialed in a 110 megahertz offset on the core clock and a 300 megahertz offset on the memory clock. And after I put an extensive load on it for a lengthier period of time, we did see the core clock frequency drop down to 2050 megahertz, but it was still very stable that entire time. There were no dips whatsoever, so that was all nice and dandy. As far as thermals are concerned, the way I tested that was in my room of 26 degrees Celsius ambient, and that was constant throughout the test, and we ran GTA 5. Initially, I was going to do Unigine Heaven 4.0, but I just figured that was a bit too GPU intensive and it didn't really tax the CPU quite enough, and I didn't feel like it was going to give us a really good representation of what a real-world result would be for the average gamer. So I jumped into GTA 5 at 4K for about, I'd say about half an hour. I did about half an hour run, not the pre-run benchmark, I just started playing the game. So after half an hour run, we actually saw the CPU hit 76 degrees Celsius at the max on its package, which is honestly fine by me. If we're in the mid-70s after overclocking a 7700K to 5 gigahertz in a very CPU-demanding game like GTA 5, then that rests well with me. As for our GPU, we had a max temperature of 65 degrees Celsius, which is, again, very reasonable, all things considered, when you're talking about an overclocked $600 graphics card pushing this many pixels is very impressive. And I've had some experience with liquid-cooled AIO GPUs in the past, which have been sort of lackluster, to be honest, so I wasn't really sure what to expect with the EVGA hybrid here, but I can definitely tell you it is very effective if you spend the time to create a custom fan curve, more than one fan that's on there, you can get really great results. So as most of you guys know, GTA 5 can be a total memory hog when it comes to 4K gaming, especially if you have all the settings cranked up, filters turned on, and things like that. And sure enough, we saw over 6 gigs of VRAM being eaten up. But what's even crazier is that throughout my entire benchmark runs, not just GTA 5, but all the benchmarks that I run for these tests, we saw nearly all 8 gigs of GDDR5X being used on this card, which is absolutely insane. It's the most VRAM usage that I've ever seen personally in this office of mine. And I'm not exactly sure which test did that. Obviously, it was something running at 4K and not at a lower resolution in order to be equipped that much. But I wasn't going to go ahead and like run all 7 benchmarks again just to see which one it was. But I think that's pretty crazy. Hopefully we'll see some 16 gigabyte cards in the near future, the next generation of GPUs from NVIDIA and AMD, because it looks like we need it if we're going to be gaming at these resolutions and with all those filters turned on. Now before we dive into the gaming benchmarks, I wanted to quickly touch on acoustics here because they are solid, very solid acoustics. Honestly, this system has a nice trifecta of raw gaming performance, cooling performance, and noise levels. I think there's a nice balance where none of those elements seems to fall too short of the others, which is really nice to see. And I think it's also a testament to the ML Pro fans that we have in here from Corsair, doing a great job keeping things cool but also quiet. So on that note, I'll go ahead and let you guys hear for yourself with a quick sound test.
Activate the shrine, defeat its guardians, and the Punisher will be ours. The wilds call out.
Alright, now the moment you've all been waiting for. Gaming benchmarks. Of course, tested on Windows 10 64-bit, as well as the latest WICL driver from NVIDIA, which is 378.66. In total, I ran 7 different applications, 5 of which were AAA games, and those were run at 1440p as well as 4K. I threw out 1080p altogether because, honestly, if you have a system like this, you should not be gaming at 1920 by 1080. I'm sorry, it's just a slap in the face, and you shouldn't do it. It's bad. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, here are the benchmarks for January's PC of the month. Alright, y'all, so there you have the results. Very impressive numbers all around. And to be honest, the GTX 1080 here doesn't really handle 4K all that well when you're dealing with AAA titles that are fully maxed out with MSAA enabled. We didn't quite hit the 60 FPS average threshold that we would have liked to in many of the games. Only Doom and Overwatch were able to achieve that, Overwatch being a less demanding title to begin with. However, once we dialed down to 1440p, this thing absolutely kicks ass with very favorable frame rates, doing well above 60 in many cases. So if you have something like a G-Sync monitor that's 1440p, and that G-Sync range is anywhere from 60 to 75 hertz, 100 hertz, you're going to get a very, very nice gameplay experience with a system like this for sure. We did see a bit of CPU bottlenecking, however, in Overwatch. Actually, there was only a few frames difference in our average frame rates going from 1440p to 4K, which meant the game is just so non-intensive that the GPU is able to render frames quicker than the CPU can actually write instructions for them. So that was pretty much expected. Overwatch does tend to see some CPU bottlenecking because it is so well optimized for the graphics card that sometimes the CPU just can't keep up. But overall, just outstanding results, and you guys can let me know what you think about them in the comments below. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Be sure to toss me a like on it if you enjoyed it. And if you want to catch videos like this on the early side, you can sign up as a Bitwit Ultra member, which is the new paid channel that I just created for $1.50 a month. You get early access as well as no ads. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't. It's a pretty cool deal and a great way to support the channel while also getting something in return for yourself. But that's going to do it for now, guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. What's
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are assembling January's PC of the month, the long-awaited rig that I've been promising you guys all month. Sorry it's a little bit late. It's almost February now, but I did get backed up after CES and all that stuff, so it's finally here though. In the flesh, I've got all the parts behind me. Very exciting stuff. This is going to be a high-end Z270 gaming machine, so we're going to be able to pump out some pretty decent frame rates at hyper 1080 resolutions. I wouldn't say 4K 60 on all the games. I would say some of the games definitely yes, but for the most part, what we're looking at here is Quad HD and ultra-wide resolutions, pretty much your sweet spot. We'll be able to push well over 60 FPS at those resolutions, which is exciting to say the least. Now, if you guys are new to my PC of the Month series, it's basically a two-part video where, as the name suggests, every month I build a full-blown system that's centered around a use case scenario and/or budget. And in part one of the series, which is what you're watching now for this rig, I basically go over all the parts that I'm using, give a little explanation, and then we kick it off with a nice time-lapse assembly and watch me build the damn thing. I look all super fast, and there's cool music in the background, makes me look awesome, and then we finish that off with some sexy B-roll. In part two, which should probably come within a week or two after this upload, is when we'll really dive into the testing. That includes overclocking, gaming benchmarks, and we'll also be looking at things like acoustics and temperature, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But on that note, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the parts that we're using for this high-end Z270 gaming machine. So taking a look at our case first, this is the Phanteks Enthoo Pro M mid-tower chassis for 120 bucks MSRP. This is a pretty freaking sweet deal here. I did opt for the tempered glass side panel version, and here it is. Don't be fooled by the box. Don't be fooled by the box. I think they just use the same acrylic design for all their models, but if it is an acrylic panel and I pull this thing out, I will legit shit inside of this case. You guys know I'm prone to doing that too. Sorry, also forgive the nasty grease stains on the box. There's some weird grease issues going on in the back of my trunk in my car. Don't ask. But this thing does have some pretty awesome radiator support as well. 360 on the top or the front. We're not going to be putting a 360 in this thing today, but you do have that option available to you. There's also plenty of custom water cooling support and things like that. Additionally, we've got our CPU of the hour, the Core i7-7700K from Intel. This is part of their 7th generation Kaby Lake family. That is their flagship model within that lineup. And it's an overclocker. It's an overclocked beast. You can push this thing all the way up to 5 gigahertz and then some if you know what you're doing and you have the proper cooling in place. So I'm really excited to be using this again. I've been using it quite a bit on the channel. I'm not tired of it quite yet. So that's going to be having to be cooled though pretty significantly by a decent liquid cooler here. So we have the Kraken X62 from NZXT. It's a 280mm rad. So I thought, you know, what the hell? I've been doing a lot of 240mm rads lately, and this thing is such a damn heat monster. It does get pretty hot when you're overclocking it to the extremes. So 280mm should give us just a bit more room for thermal headroom and things like that, some more dissipation than what we might ordinarily have on a 240 rad. Also, we've got our memory kit here, our RAM sauce, the Ripjaws 5 from J-Scale. This is a 16 gigabyte kit of DDR4, of course, at 1600, what is this? What is this, a freaking Sandy Bridge video? No, this is 3000 megahertz, yo. This is freaking 2017. The RAM kit's gonna be paired with this motherboard. This is also a beast of a motherboard. This is the Asus TUF Z270 Mark I, and when Asus sent this to me, I immediately opened it up and I was like, shawing, yeah. Gave me a straight up chub, and as you know, it features Asus Aura Sync and all that stuff. It's got thermal armor, which is very unique feature to the TUF series of motherboards, and yeah, should be pretty kick-ass. I think it's going to look really sick in the Enthoo Pro M. Now, the graphics card we're using for this build is basically our bread and butter for this whole system. It is the star of the show for the most part. It's the EVGA GTX 1080 Hybrid, which, as most of you guys know, features a built-in 120mm liquid AIO unit on top of it, integrated pump and all that stuff. So it's good to go. It's completely water-cooled out of the box. And base clock of 1860 megahertz, I believe. You know, you got the typical 8 gigs of GDDR5X memory and all that good stuff. VR ready, of course. It'll totally crush anything VR related for sure. You could probably even do, like I said earlier, maybe some 4K 60 gaming, depending on the game. But it's gonna just haul ass in our tests. I can't wait to actually get this thing in the system. I've never tried out one of these firsthand, so this is gonna be another first for me. Looking forward to seeing what kind of overclocks we can hit on it and what kind of frame rates that will yield. We've also got some really nice storage options for today's build. This is the Hellfire NVMe SSD M.2 drive from Patriot. It's a 480 gig model, so we'll have plenty plenty of storage for our operating system, which will be Windows 10 64-bit, of course, as well as all of our games and applications. I mean, I wouldn't say all of our games, but there's definitely a lot of room here to install at least a couple AAA games for really fast loading times and getting into your games and your maps very quickly. There's also, what is this, 2.5 gigabytes a second, I believe, for reads, and 1.2 gigabytes thereabouts a second for writes. So very fast indeed. It's got a Phison 5007 controller, I believe, which just sounds fast and badass, and I'm sure it is going to be plenty fast for our needs today. We've also got a 1 terabyte, where are you? A 1 terabyte WD Black. I thought I had a 2 terabyte on me, but I don't, apparently. So we're going to be using this 1 terabyte today. Let it be known that if this was my personal build, I would have definitely upgraded this to a 2 terabyte hard drive, just because I've got quite a few games nowadays, and they're getting bigger and bigger every day. So, but that's going to be plenty fine for this build. We've also got the EVGA Supernova 650 watt G2. Fully modular, I can't talk anymore, fully modular, take a breath, Cal. Fully modular unit, 80 plus gold certified, very good certification rating, does tons of efficiency and all that jazz. It's got a really nice warranty, I believe, as well. Fans. We're going to be installing some third-party fans here from Corsair. This is their ML140 Pros. We've got 4 of them to deal with, to work with today, I should say. Not to deal. We've got to deal with these fans. These are their very nice magnetic levitation fans that I did get to check out at Computex last year. I hear that they're pretty quiet, and the really nice thing is that they're kind of balanced for airflow and static pressure. So you can either use them as case fans or radiator fans. So depending on how things are looking, I might actually slap some of these on to the Kraken X62. Not just because, you know, not that I don't have any faith in the NZXT fans or anything, but just maybe to give it a little bit more personal touch, customize it a bit, and maybe these will be a little bit quieter. I'm not sure. We'll test it out and stuff. I also really like the way they look, so it is a bit of an aesthetic thing for me as well. Last but not least, we've got the EVGA PowerLink. PowerLink, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Jade did a really good video on it. It's a really cool little unit that you can actually attach to the front or the PCIe connectors of your graphics card, and allows you to plug in your cables from the side of the graphics card instead of the front, just to give it a nice clean look overall. The front of this thing looks really slick, and I will be using it in tandem today with these Fantex pre-sleeved cables in black. The 24 pin is not shown right now, but I will be using that as well. I think the PowerLink is going to be cool, especially since I've never used it before. Pretty excited to be using all of that. So on that note, guys, I think those are all the parts. Did I miss anything? No? Looks pretty good. So now you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the time lapse as I assemble this collection of badassery. Here we go.
Another shrine will be active soon. Do not let our enemy claim it.
Alright, so here she is, folks. Woo! Looking good, I must say. Holy moly. By the way, I'm going handheld now, so forgive any shakiness that may occur. But this is looking pretty sweet. I'm really happy with how this turned out. The one thing that I'll say is sticking out right now is the orange LED on the motherboard here, on the tough motherboard, but that is RGB, so once we load up Windows 10, we can jump into the software and either disable it or change it to white, something that's a bit more matchy-matchy. But apart from that, looking pretty good. Really loving how the fans turned out as well. They look pretty sweet in this chassis with everything.
The G-Skill Ripjaw's KM570 gaming keyboard features genuine Cherry MX mechanical switches, customizable per-key lighting effects, and macro support, full N-key rollover, and more. Click the link in the description for more details. Excellent! So last week I attended an AMD press event, as many of you deduced by my tweets and or a particularly insightful conspiracy thread on the AMD subreddit. While much of the information shared there still remains under embargo, today you'll be hearing about Radeon Instinct, a new suite of hardware and open source software offerings designed to dramatically increase performance efficiency and ease of implementation of deep learning workloads. And although there's likely a niche of my audience who drools over news about machine learning hardware and what it means for our future robot overlords, the bulk of you probably want to know what the hell this has to do with Vega, the code name for Radeon Technology Group's long-awaited next-gen GPU family. To explain that, let's first figure out what the heck Radeon Instinct is. So basically there's too much data. It's generated every day by everything from social media posts to traffic sensors, and combing through it is impossible without networks of big fast computers. AMD's new solution for this is Radeon Instinct, represented by a hardware-software combination of their new Zen-based Naples server CPUs, Radeon GPUs, and ROCm, Radeon Open Compute for deep learning neural networks. Going into any depth about this type of thing is beyond me, so I will be linking to several articles in this video's description for anyone who wants to read a little bit further about that. PC Perspectives write-up is also linked down there because I owe Ryan Shrout a shout-out, PM, for inspiring the wild theories I'm about to share. So since GPUs can process massive quantities of parallel operations, they're ideal for handling tasks that provide huge amounts of data. For example, analyzing global financial markets, helping the AI on an autonomous vehicle deal with sensor input, or hyper-realistic 3D real-time renders of ray-traced environments. AMD introduced 3 GPUs today that they have renamed accelerators to align with their intended tasks. And side note, they're all passively cooled because they're made to live in server racks and have their own loud-ass fans. The Radeon Instinct MI6 has 5.7 teraflops of compute performance, 16 gigs of memory, 224 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, a 150 watt TDP, and is Polaris-based, so you could equate it to an RX 480 on the gaming GPU side, apart from it having twice the memory and a bit less memory bandwidth. The Radeon Instinct Mi8 has 8.2 teraflops of compute performance, 4 gigabytes of HBM memory, a 175 watt TDP, and AMD tells us quite directly that it's based on their Fiji GPU, which is the same one that's used in the R9 Fury and Nano. Finally, there is the Radeon Instinct Mi25 with a 300 watt TDP, but no compute performance listed or any other juicy specs really. Apart from one huge one, it will use AMD's next generation high performance Vega GPU architecture. So let me be very clear here that we're now moving into the theory crafting and speculation part of this video, and to begin, let's assume a couple things. One is that there's probably only one actual Vega GPU, the chip itself, that Radeon is almost ready to launch. And two is that the rack mount solutions that AMD has also showed us today have somewhat accurate compute performance listed. My suspicion, which Mr.